The Order of Horkos is portrayed in the game to be the obvious villains. Everything about them spells edgy, dark, and menacing. They are a tyrannical group intent on controlling Heathmore. Hell, the name of the season in which they arrive is called Tyranny. With Astria at the head and the Warmongers as the ambassadors of the Order, and the use of a practical bioweapon to strong-arm people into their service, let's face it, they're not saints. But are they evil? Well, while I do believe that Astria and the Order of Horkos is wrong in their beliefs, I do not necessarily see them as evil. Mad, you say? Insane of me to even question their motives and morals? I don't think so. Let's take a little dive into the Order of Horkos and their ideology. I promise I won't take too long on this, but it's something I want to address because as we've gone further and further into this Season 4 year where we've had an obvious two-way war between Chimera and Horkos, I'm starting to see a major theme pop up that there's a clear-cut villain and a clear-cut bad guy. And it's easy to see why that would be the case because Horkos has done a lot of things very bad, and Chimera seems to be doing all the good stuff. But then I saw one daily order with a bit of story implanted in it saying that this civil war between Chimera and Horkos had divided entire families, much like the United States Civil War did. And I kept on thinking to myself, could we really compare the United States Civil War to the war between Horkos and Chimera? And at first I said no, but then I really thought about it and thought, there might be something there after all, so let's take a look. The Order of Horkos at its core is carrying on Apollons Legacy, which was what? Watch my Apollon video for more details, but in short, Apollon believed that the natural state of humanity was war and conflict. It's how we live. It's how we survive. Stagnation makes us weak and vulnerable. Really analyze why she thought that. Apollon, when she was a little girl, when her home was overrun by Vikings, the knights did nothing to save her family and friends. She witnessed an atrocity take place because of complacency and because of weakness. There was no strong warriors in her home to defend it, so she lost everything. So she discovered the truth of reality, and that was, only the strong will survive, and war determines who is strong.
The natural state of our species. Yet these monsters flee from it. They're cowards. We must be brave for them.
In her own mind, Apollon was helping Heathmore. Is the Order doing something similar? Well, let's analyze what's happening and what has happened before it arrived. Consider all that's happened since this massive war first started. We start 1,000 years ago. A great cataclysm shakes the world, and the only surviving cultures were the ones that were strong enough and powerful enough to endure. Only the mighty could survive to go on into the next era. Knights, samurai, Vikings. They were the mighty. They were the strong. Fast forward, and the land is starting to become peaceful now. They're starting to forget the reason they fought. The warriors lack the resolve to fight now. Apollon fears what this weakness will mean and quickly reignites the war. Now, the war is back on in a big way. But what are the leaders of Heathmore trying to do now? What did we see at the end of the story mode in For Honor?
We've shared our stories, like your Lord Warden requested. Now, why are we here?
Peace.
They want peace. They're going to strive for peace. And what happens? Well, along come the Wulen. A foreign invasion. A foreign threat arrives and takes a foothold in Heathmore. This has never happened before. Was it because everyone was too weak to stop it? Everyone was too complacent to repel them? Well, maybe. At least that's the way Horkos might have interpreted it. But it gets worse. New signs of a second cataclysm begin to emerge around year 3. The people are afraid. They bring out their strongest warriors, intent on ending the war quickly. And then, when the signs finally subside, when things finally settle, a truce. The Truce of Wyverndale. To some, this was ludicrous. Why are the rulers of Heathmore discussing peace when they should be trying to improve their forces? Hey, the scare's over. Now let's rebulk and reestablish our forces. Why are we celebrating in festivals and games when war is ever present? What happens when another cataclysm comes? Will we be strong enough to survive it, like our ancestors? What happens when a stronger foreign invader comes like the Wulin? Will we let them march all over us too? Will they be so strong and so vicious they just wipe us out? No. No, to Astria and the warmongers, this is wrong. Astria believed it to be wrong, and then, seeing a vision of the god Horkos speak to her, telling her to finish Apollon's work, it all confirmed it for her. Horkos, the god of truth, told her the truth. The reason for these hardships and this suffering was because of the very thing that led to Apollon's home being burned. This truce was not peace. It was complacency. I want you to remember that word, complacency. It was willingness to ignore reality, the willingness to deny the truth. The Vikings, once the mighty and vicious savages of the ice, were now kneeling to knightly kings. The lords of Ashfeld, once immovable and valorous in combat, were now bowing to daimyo. The samurai, once staunch, faithful, and fierce warriors, were now paying respects to the Viking jarls. And the Wulin, a force that shouldn't be there at all, was sitting in on meetings about how the country they aren't even from should be run. Astria couldn't stand it. Many couldn't stand it. It was an insult. So what did she go to do? What was her plan? Who did she rally? That's the next one I want to talk about. When she decides that she's going to do something about it, she knows she can't do it alone. So she gets her warmongers together, but that's still not enough. She needs more. She still needs followers. So who does she go to? In the trailer, she has a Hitakiri, a Black Prior, a Jormungandr, and a Tsanhu with her specifically. These were warriors who had been called on in the last year during the Cataclysm scare to prepare for a speedy end of the war. Remember, all the factions were afraid that this huge cataclysm is coming again. Everything's going to be wiped out. So they said, we quickly need to wipe out the other factions so that we can end the war now, and that way we can prepare for the cataclysm. Because even then, people were realizing, you know what, only the strong are going to survive this. We need to make sure we're the only ones surviving. So we're going to bring out our secret weapons. The knights pull out the Black Prior. The samurai pull out the Hitakiri. The Vikings pull out the Jormungandr. The Wulin pull out the Tsanhu. They're all throwing in all the stops. Imagine how these four warrior groups that were called on must have felt. Called out of hiding for a great war, prepared to fight and die for their faction, prepared to give it all for their end goal. Then suddenly told, hey, no need anymore. War's coming to an end and everything you were going to do, no longer relevant. Your sacrifices were not purposeful. Just go home, guys. It's no big deal. An insult. Again, an insult that Astria and the warmongers could use to turn them to their side. They would be meaningful again. They would have purpose. They would remind all of Heathmoor what they were. They weren't peacemakers. They weren't seekers of compromise. They were warriors. And warriors make war. Warriors do not kneel to the enemy. They take off the head of defeated enemies. But why? Because they're evil? No, evil and good have nothing to do with it. It's about survival. If they allow weakness and complacency to grow, then what becomes of their world? The same fate as Apollon's home. Destruction, death, damnation. They might not survive another cataclysm or another invasion. They won't be prepared for it. To the Order of Horkos, it's not about evil. It's about saving Heathmoor from its foolish path of idealism and peace. They need to survive, even if it means taking a very dangerous and morally outrageous route. But are they right? I mean, okay. Let's clarify. They're certainly not. For one thing, society cannot flourish in perpetual war. War stagnates progress and discovery. Though Heathmoor could gain new armors, new weapons, and everything else necessary for combat, civilian life would crumble. There would be no safe havens, and infighting would take place among their own factions. As we saw in the story mode, the factions are just as prone to turning on each other as they are to fighting the enemy. There must be pauses in war, breaks, truces, the allowance for supplies to be regained, forces to be bolstered, and new technologies to be acquired. The only civilizations and empires that have been able to progress or grow while in wartime are ones like Rome or America, who were capable of maintaining an economy that would uphold a foreign war. But Heathmoor is a local internal civil war. The economy wouldn't be able to sustain itself very well. I mean, some people tried to point out to me like stuff like Warhammer 40K, where everything is just endless war. And I think that's interesting because people point that out. But then I also ask the question, okay, endless war, Do they progress? Do they grow anything? Do they grow technology? No, literally everything's been lost. Technology's been lost. Understanding's been lost. They've forgotten so much of their history, you know, and they've forgotten so much of what made humanity great in the first place. So in this case, yeah, definitely we would see, we don't need war constantly. There need to be truces and breaks in it. And so because of that, the warmongers are not right in their goals. The reason I make this video is to provide a new perspective on this war. Much like how we can't look at the American Civil War as a simple, clear-cut case of good versus evil, we can't look at Chimera versus Horkos as the clear-cut good versus evil either. Chimera isn't necessarily fighting for peace, but just to return to form, to overthrow what they see as the oppressive tyrant Astria. Horkos isn't necessarily fighting to destroy all things good and just, but to prevent Heathmore from becoming complacent and weak. I'm not saying Horkos is going about it in the right way, but I am saying their ideology isn't one built on evil, just ignorance. Now, some might point out, okay, that's an interesting case for Horkos. What about Chimera? How can you argue they're not the good guys? They're trying to overthrow the tyrants. Well, okay, think about this for a second. Did anyone in the Chimera Alliance say that they were fighting for peace? Not that I remember. In fact, even Griffin said that claiming you're fighting for peace is just pretty words. What did he say he was doing? He said he was fighting because it's what he knew to do. It's what he could do. He has breath in his lungs. He's going to fight. He's going to do what he can to make things right for himself because he feels like he did wrong. He's there to make things right and fix the problems. So that's where Griffin is coming from. But are they really trying to fight for peace? Think about this. When the Orochi beats Apollyon, he says, now we will have peace. And Apollyon straight up laughs at that, saying, peace? Really? Really? Peace? You brought all your armies here. You brought your warriors. Do you really think that peace is going to be the end result? Do you really think that peace is coming from this? No. You geared up for war. And now war is what we're going to have. That's just the nature of society. That's the nature of people. In fact, like if you want to learn a little bit of Japanese history, one of the reasons why Toyotomi Hideyoshi, after taking control of Japan, sent his samurai to go fight a war to invade China through Korea, it was partly because with all the wars done in Japan, he knew that the samurai were going to get a little restless, so he needed them fighting something. He needed to get them to blow off some steam in a war, and it really helped that there was a chance to go to war against China and build on the utopia and hopefully get his samurai to burn off that steam and need to fight, you know? So that's a large part of it. Point being, what is Chimera really fighting for? Is Chimera fighting for peace? No. Chimera is fighting to end tyranny. But at the end of tyranny, what comes? Well, I guess they would just return to the status quo. There would be a lot of mistrust. Obviously, the knights would be very mistrusted because many of the warmongers appear to be knights. They seem to be siding with they seem to be using knight armor, knight weapons, knight tactics. Many knights would probably be very mistrusted. Even if they said, hey, not all the warmongers were knights, you know, they'd still argue, yeah, but you practically work as Astria was one, blah, blah, blah. The secret weapons, the Black Priors, the Jormungandrs, the Hitakiris, the Sanhus would also be very mistrusted because they so quickly turned to the dark side, you know? Like, it would be very hard to trust each other. Things would start to fall apart again, and that's kind of what we saw after Apollyon was defeated. So at the end of the day, even though they claim to be fighting for a higher purpose, they claim to be fighting for the right reasons, if they win, will that be what happens? When World War I ended, things weren't great for Europe. Germany fell into despair because they were soldiered with the burden of debt. And so you can't say that everything worked out super well for them. At the end of the American Civil War, the North won, but still the South was greatly mistreated and greatly persecuted, even though Abraham Lincoln himself pushed to forgive and forget, to move on. You know, we need to start building ourselves as a one nation again. The South was still very mistreated. And look at the motivations, too. The motivations in the American Civil War are very interesting. You have one side that the South, in this case, seeing the North as an oppressive government. They are to take away their states' rights. And yes, some of those states' rights were awful, like slavery, but still, it was a breach of what they saw to be right. And so they were fighting to defend state rights and to become their own nation. While the Union, the North, wanted to maintain the Union, maintain the status quo. While both sides felt that they were in the right, both sides had negativities, problems, good intentions, bad intentions. My point is this. This is my final point in the video. When looking at any side of war, there is never any simple, oh, well, clearly this is the good guys and the bad guys. All guys on this side are evil. All guys on this side are good. Never works that way. There's always even the slightest bit of gray area. There's always some kind of gray area that we need to see. Even something as reprehensible as, say, the Nazi Party in Germany. Sure, they did evil, atrocious things. One of the few moments in history where I really can say it was a battle of good versus evil. But when I see the Nazi Party, I also see what happens when a broken and scared country are willing to listen to a maniac. What drove Germany to listen to Hitler may have been the same things that drove the warmongers and the Order of Horkos to listen to Austria. Just food for thought. Do I think that the Order of Horkos is doing the right thing? No. But do I kind of understand the ideology behind what they're doing? Kind of. It makes sense in a twisted way. I can understand the perspective they're coming from, even if I don't fully agree with it. Like I said, I'm not saying Horkos is going about this in the right way, but I am saying their ideology isn't one built on evil. Just ignorance. Take care, guys, and I will see you in the next video.